Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 192. Story Horizon. Part 4. It was a legendary story, but at the same time, there was no special function. Nevertheless, the existence of the story itself was enough to attract the attention of the Weni man. This story. How about it? Do you like it? The Weni man stared at the story with eyes full of disbelief. His eyes trembled as if such a story wasn't possible. The long fingertips touched the window and the contents of the story started to play. Peek. Peek. Piak. The intermediate dakibi pal was being pounded by my fists. Every time the face of the dakibi was battered, an expression of shock crossed the Weni man's face. The story one who showed contempt for a streamer. Even if this story was given, I had 5 stories above the legendary level and my status wouldn't be jeopardized. Naturally, it was a story that the Weni man was bound to love. There were those who liked to swear at the dakibi and was bound to like stories beating the dakibi up. Kook, kookek, akuhahahat. The Weni man soon let out a burst of laughter. I waited until he had fully enjoyed it. Good, I'll take this. It is a very pleasant story. Then do we have a deal? It is still lacking. The story you gave is rare, but it has almost no functional value. I figured this would come out. I quickly added, then I'll give you Scylla allied forces as well. It is still insufficient. If you want to continue the transaction, you have to change the contents of the deal. Change it? How? As I said earlier, you asked for 2 things. One is to return to the scenario, and the other is to get a new incarnation body. I thought for a moment before asking, is this story enough to only cover one of them? That's right. To be exact, I can only help you get an incarnation body. Gaining an incarnation body. This was naturally important. However, why can't you return me to the scenario? Can't you originally help with this much? You talk like you know something. I've heard some things. Rather, I had read about it. Chiok Jungyang was excluded from the scenario, and I remembered what the Nebula Hongik paid. The Weni man stared into my eyes and said, normally this price would be enough, but the current situation is a bit special. Special? The Bureau and Nebulae are nervous due to everything you have done. I somehow understood what he was talking about. The Weni man kept speaking. Returning in exile to the scenario is a lot more expensive than you think. It is one of the most intensive consumption of probability in the entire star stream. Still, as you know, I have a close relationship with the eyes of the probability. In a situation like this where many eyes are watching, you will have to pay too much probability. Yes. Furthermore, I don't know the reason, but the branch manager of the Bureau, Barem, has come out and all existing transaction windows are blocked. At present, the straight route of return to the scenario is almost completely blocked. I can't afford it, even if you pay a bigger price. I couldn't go straight back to Earth. The situation wasn't as smooth as I thought. The Weni man looked at me and asked, do you just want an incarnation body? This is a legendary story, so I can give you a decent body. There are a number of healthy incarnation bodies that I have recovered from the Murim side. Incarnation bodies from Murim. It was an enticing proposition. However, I shook my head. No matter how good the body, it would be futile if I couldn't return to the scenario. A new incarnation body could stop the collapse for a while, but if I didn't return to the scenario, the collapse would still persist. The Weni man was making such a suggestion because he knew this. Once my new incarnation body was broken down from the exile penalty, he would try to take my other stories with a new deal. I decided to push harder. I have to go back to the scenario. By any means. It is more important than getting an incarnation body. HRMM, it is difficult. Earth isn't possible, then is it okay to go to other scenarios? This was how Cheok Jungyong escaped from the Korean Peninsula scenario. There was no reason I couldn't do it. However, the Wenny man shook his head. There are a few places to search, but it isn't good. Moving to an escape scenario requires a greater probability. Is it really like this? Are you being greedy? I deliberately waved the story window through the air. The sight of the intermediate Dakibi Paul being punched shook slightly. It is a rarer story than you think. What type of incarnation would strike a Dakibi in a world controlled by them? Imagine if you put this in your lump and boast about it to your friends. The Wenny man agonized over it for a long time. He thought and thought about it. Your existence is at stake. Acquire a new incarnation body or return to the scenario. Your existence will soon collapse. Finally, the Wenny man opened his mouth. There is one place that you can go. Where? At this moment, an eerie light appeared around the Wenny man's mouth. The demon world. His tone sounded as if he was saying something terrible. The Wenny man saw my expression and laughed. You don't have to be so scared. The demon world is also a place where people live. Besides, there is enough demonic energy in your body that it won't be noticeable if you go there. There are different areas of the demon world. Where are you going to send me? The 73rd Demon Realm. It is a place without a ruler. It is also a place where the losers of the scenario have gathered since a long time ago. The 73rd Demon Realm. If I remembered correctly, it was one of the scenario areas that overlapped with the Earth scenario. I nodded. Well, it isn't bad. Instead, I won't be able to supply you with an incarnation body if I send you there. However, I will return to the scenario. Entering the scenario area didn't mean I could return to the scenario. It was because I had already finished the scenario. In other words, I had to get help to enter the scenario. Then the Wenny man shook his head. It is too unreasonable. I can only send you to the 73rd Demon Realm. What nonsense is this? I will give you some information instead. You will need a lot of luck and effort, but if you use this information, you will be able to get an incarnation body and return to the scenario. It looks like a losing deal for me. Still, it is all I can offer. I pretended to think for a moment before slowly nodding. Now I had no other option. Okay, I will accept that deal. I had decided, so there was no need to waste any more time. I immediately pulled out the story and gave it to him. You have paid the story one who showed contempt for a streamer. The Wenny man nodded. The price has been received. The Wenny man swallowed the story that he had received from me. Then his lump shone blue. He smiled with satisfaction and took a deep breath. It was as if he was sucking all the air around him. I looked closer and realized he wasn't just swallowing air. The time and space around him was being sucked inside. The lump swelled by several times before there was a loud roar. Along with the roar, a space poured out of the Wenny man's mouth. The space that came pouring out created a long, elliptical passage. Beyond this passage, the landscape of a different world was shining. Quickly enter. It has a very short duration, unlike a portal. I jumped into the passage without hesitation. You have been transferred to a new time and space. It felt like he was jumping through the universe. Stars passed like countless meteor showers. I was flying through the night sky of the star stream. Numerous scenario areas that had become fragments of the story flew around me. The star stream has noticed your presence. For a moment, there was a gaze on me. The star stream has accepted your presence. Then the gaze disappeared. A small current seized my body, but that was all. Perhaps the necessary probability was paid by the Wenny man. After a short space journey, I felt the gravity of a powerful story pulling at me. You have reached an area adjacent to the scenario. I rolled across a dust-covered ground with a groan. The impact affected my body as the areas touching the ground started to crack little by little. Your existence is collapsing. Your stories are damaged. You need a new incarnation body. Damn. I hurriedly got up from the ground, but the hell had already begun. Kuhuk. Letters started to flow from the cracks in my body. The most dangerous area was my heart. Your birth story is leaking out. If I didn't seal the wounds and save my body, all my stories would collapse and I would die. I hurriedly looked around. That guy said he would send me to a place where I could save my body. There must be something here that could make up the incarnation body. The moment I looked around, my expression hardened. This place. There was a huge pile of garbage around me. Then, as if he had been waiting, I heard the voice of the Weni man. Perhaps by now, you have arrived in the 73rd demon realm and you are facing the horizon of the scenario. The horizon of the scenario. I knew this name. It was a place where the wastes excluded from the scenario, like me, were forcibly thrown by the scenario cleaners. I shouted as I looked at the debris rolling around. No, wait a minute. This is a dumpster. You will be able to obtain an incarnation body that can be used from there. Of course, you have to find useful components. Well, I don't know if you can get them. Damn it. The Weni man wasn't planning a fair deal with me from the beginning. If I was to die, he would come here and retrieve my stories. I hope you can find something good from the horizon. I hesitantly sat down. Letters kept falling from my heart. If this continued, I would die in less than 5 minutes. After a moment, Kim Dokja's expression started to change. I slowly looked around. It was for certain. I couldn't feel the eyes of the Weni man at all. The confused eyes became calm and the mouth, that was open like a fool, slowly closed. Soon, Kim Dokja restored his clothes and muttered. It's hard. Kim Dokja's act ing is rowing. Did you notice? I slowly looked down. It was pretty annoying, but I had to act to avoid the Weni man's doubts. His purpose was to come here in the first place. If he wants to get what he wants while hiding as much as possible, he has to act this much. I listened to the fourth wall as I searched the surrounding area. I think I came to the right place. As the fourth wall said, I planned to come here from the beginning. It was why I put on a death show in front of the constellations. I climbed the garbage pile and started to look around. Quack, it hurts. However, it wasn't easy to maintain my sanity due to the piercing pain in my heart. Your birth story is collapsing. Everything else was clearly acting, but this pain wasn't false. I desperately held on to my consciousness while thinking of sentences from Ways of Survival. It was Yu Jong-hyuk's 111th regression. Yu Jong-hyuk was expelled from the scenario and reached a place where he could build up his power. The 73rd demon realm, the horizon of the scenario. At the dumpster, Yu Jong-hyuk got his new body. Nevertheless, no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find a story that could be the materials for a new body. In the first place, the horizon of the scenario was a place where broken stories converged. There was no way I could find a usable body in this place. At least, through a normal method. Activate an attribute effect. The effect of the Lamarck Kiran attribute has been activated. Lamarck Kiran was an evolutionary attribute that I purchased for 300,000 coins. It was an attribute left behind in Baihyung's item box. Finally, the time had come for the consumption of coins to be worth it. The privilege evolution factor search has begun. Searching for story fragments that you can absorb. I slowly closed and opened my eyes as different things started to become noticeable around the garbage dump. Story fragments have been detected. The fragments were shining with a white light. At least for me, this place wasn't a dumpster. The right arm of the poor sword master, who was stabbed in the back by a colleague. The terribly damaged frontal lobe of a grand wizard. The heart of a young gold dragon who was torn to death by an outer god. According to the setting of Ways of Survival, the privilege of Lamarck Kieran was to construct the body by absorbing broken stories. Then I am starting. I slowly reached out towards a red heart fragment. Chapter 193. Story Horizon. Part 5. The texture of the dull quilt touched skin. Young Hee-won didn't know how long it had been since she enjoyed a luxury like this. Everything was peaceful. She didn't need to be afraid of being attacked by monsters in the night or watch out for humans trying to steal her items. However, Young Hee-won was well aware that this peace wouldn't last long. Young Hee-won SSI. Please open the door. I'm asking you for an interview. For a week, reporters had been clamoring in front of the house. She could glimpse flashes of light through the curtains. In front of the ruthless gazes of the cameras, Young Hee-won felt a strong sense of déjà vu. It isn't just the constellations who are voyeurs. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon is chuckling. The constellation Secretive Plotter agrees with your thoughts. Young Hee-won felt a new sense of emotion at all the gazes on her. Before the scenario began, the forms were different, but there were similar things. The voyeuristic gazes and the struggle for survival. In this sense, the scenario might be around before the scenario even started. Nobody knew it was a scenario. Through the window, she saw the broken city area and the blocked Seoul Dome. It had already been a week since they left Seoul Dome, but Young Hee-won couldn't believe she was out of the dome. Hee-won Uni. Did you just wake up? Ah yes, Jae-hai. Young Hee-won smiled helplessly as Lee Jae-hai burst through the door. It had been 1 week after the escape from Seoul Dome. Many things had happened in the meantime. Young Hee-won and the group were assisted with homes by the provisional government in the Gyeonggi area and were invited to the institute to answer a few questions. They were obvious questions. What happened inside Seoul Dome? Were the rumors on the internet true? How many people were like them and what ideas did they have? What were the constellations and the scenario? At first, Young Hee-won faithfully answered the questions as the representative. Then over time, the whole thing became annoying. She wondered what was the point in doing this. The South Korean government had already disappeared. The provisional government, made up of some lucky parliament and city council members, had no idea what had happened. They still firmly believed that the state system would be meaningful in the face of future scenarios. For those who were still stuck to old beliefs despite the new era, Young Hee-won had something to say to them. Take off your suits and your ties first. Huh? They aren't good outfits to run away in. Young Hee-won glanced at Lee Jae-hai. In any case, the party members were the only ones she could believe in. What about Ju Sang-ga SSI? She is in a room with the kids. The problem was that the party members weren't well. Lee Jae-hai spoke in a dark voice. The loss of Dokja Juicy is a big blow. Honestly, things were uncertain when he was with them, but once he was missing, everyone was lost. This was Kim Dokja to the party members. Everyone's purpose was survival, but it was Kim Dokja who decided the path of survival. It was natural for the party members to lose their direction and scatter. I wish I had the manual that Soldier Ajusi mentioned. Have you heard from Hyun-sung SSI yet? He was called to the army on the first day, and there is still no news. Lee Hyun-sung was originally a soldier, and it was natural for him to be called by the army. Lee Jae-hai whined. He is really foolish. I wouldn't have gone. What use is the army in this world? Young Hee-won agreed with Lee Jae-hai's words, but she didn't want to scold Lee Hyun-sung. Everyone had different ways of dealing with loss. The children stayed in the room while Lee Hyun-sung returned to the army. If it was just that. The following scenario will start in 3 days. Young Hee-won gulped as she saw the message floating in the air. 3 days later, hell would begin again. The more complicated problem was that the scenarios in the future were likely to be completely different from what they had already been through. You can now respond to the call of the sponsors and receive the personal trials they have set. Personal trials are treated as hidden scenarios and can be replaced the main scenario if it overlaps with certain main scenarios. Scenario substitution is available only until the 25th main scenario begins. They passed the 10th scenario and opened the personal trials. Young Hee-won didn't have a sense of what they were yet. Lee Jae-hai spoke in a comforting manner. "Don't worry too much. Master said it isn't a big deal for the moment. How about Yu Jong-hyuk SSI? I don't know where he went after Kim Dokja's song. He is unlike the real master." Certainly, Yu Jong-hyuk's reaction to Kim Dokja's death was puzzling. Yu Jong-hyuk stayed in his room like a broken person for a while before suddenly disappearing, saying he would be back in 3 days. Han Soo-young SSI? She went to talk to the government officials this morning. She said it is time to reap the seeds that were sown. The government? What can she expect from them? Then something belatedly came to her mind. If something happens to me, unconditionally follow Han Soo-young. They were words that Kim Dokja once left with her. Why did they have to move with Han Soo-young? However, there must be a reasonable explanation since Kim Dokja said this. Young Hee-won got up and the surprised Lee Jae-hai asked, "Are you going out?" "Yes. I can't continue staying inside here. We should also get ready. Then I'll go with you." Both of them didn't have a hesitant nature once they decided on something. Lee Jae-hai and Young Hee-won headed straight out of the house. They opened the front door and the shutter sound poured towards them. Young Hee-won SSI. I'm a reporter from Jeorio Ilbo. Only one word. Please. They weren't the only survivors. Nearly 1,000 people came back from Seoul Dome. Some of them contacting the living and spoke about the terrible few months they lived. The reporters continued to find the party members despite accumulating enough stories. The reason was simple. Among the 1,000 survivors, Young Hee-won and the others were celebrities who were at the center of the scenario. Young Hee-won SSI. What happened inside there? I heard it was helpful that you learnt kendo. Is that true? There is a rumor that you were a candidate for the national team. Young Hee-won looked at the reporters pushing their microphones towards her. The government had told her not to tell the media what happened. She had been saving her words so far because she didn't find it easy to talk. Then, why? Today, Young Hee-won felt like saying something. You are curious about what happened inside there? Young Hee-won let go of Lee Jae-hai's hand and looked at the banner waving outside. Yangchungu's hero. Celebrating the safe return of Judge of Destruction, Young Hee-won. Hero? Her? Yang Chun-gu had long since disappeared. Nevertheless, this banner was hung and Young Hee-won couldn't withstand it anymore. I'm not the hero you think I am. I wasn't a candidate for the national team and I didn't do well in kendo. Young Hee-won spoke into the microphone like she was talking to the whole world. Before the destruction came, I was just a bartender working at a cheap bar. Her words caused a stir among the reporters. Nobody could believe it. Someone scoffed and someone else looked a bit jealous. In front of these gazes, Young Hee-won felt strangely free. She wasn't the old Young Hee-won anymore. Young Hee-won realized it, with all these eyes on her. The reporters kept asking her questions. How could a bartender become one of the last survivors? How could she survive and how did she become the Judge of Destruction? The constellation Bald General of Justice is looking at you with sad eyes. The constellation One-Eyed Maitreya is reminded of someone by your words. The indirect messages of the constellations came from all over the place. Young Hee-won opened her mouth without understanding her feelings. Do you know Kim Dokja? The constellation Maritime War God is nodding. The constellation Coaeil Pil remembers the name. The constellation, last hero of Wangsanbil, remembers him. The voices of the reporters followed after the constellation. Kim Dokja? Who is that? I seem to have heard it before. Young Hee-won thought it was funny. They didn't know. Of course, they could never know. Young Hee-won lightly breathed in and said, "The last survivors didn't survive with our own strength." She suddenly felt like crying as she spoke. The reporters didn't know anything and kept asking questions. What are you saying? The name Kim Dokja isn't on the list of survivors? Why didn't Kim Dokja Sasai come back with you? Where is that person now? Where was he? Young Hee-won didn't know. However, if she had one wish. That person, Young Hee-won, stared at the Seoul Dome. He'll be back. Definitely. At this time, Kim Dokja opened his eyes in the demon world. Heek! I screamed as I vomited and opened my eyes. The sound of my heartbeat was unfamiliar. A golden aura appeared around my heart and rough magic power was emitted. It might be broken, but it was still the heart of a dragon hatchling. The strong magic power of the transplanted material was enough to stun me. If I could use this properly, I wouldn't be lacking magic power in combat for a while. The attribute Lamarck Kirin has allowed you to absorb the power of the broken story. In fact, absorbing a broken story was a dangerous idea. It would have been impossible for me without Lamarck Kirin. Lamarck Kirin isn't acknowledged among the other evolutionary attributes because it is less effective. However, it has the fewest side effects and doesn't absorb the weakness of the story. If I had obtained Darwin's demon, another evolutionary attribute, I would have been killed the moment I ate the gold dragon's story. This absorption effect was good because my safety was guaranteed. I didn't have multiple lives anymore. The story fragment Broken Heart of a Young Gold Dragon has been acquired. The original name of this story fragment was Heart of a Young Gold Dragon who was torn to death by an outer god. However, I didn't absorb the torn to death by an outer god part. This was the advantage of Lamarck Kirin. The absorption rate of the story was low, but the weakness wasn't absorbed. Your new body is being constructed. The creation of a new body will delay the collapse of your existence. This effect is temporary, and it is recommended to quickly return to the scenario. Magic power flowed from my new beating heart and I could breathe a bit. At the very least, the tragedy of losing my birth story wouldn't happen anymore. The reconstruction of my body would start from now on. I started to eat right arm of the poor sword master who was stabbed in the back by a colleague. Rather than tearing off flesh, it was closer to peeping at a story that broke as soon as it was seen. The story fragment right arm of the poor sword master has been acquired. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, but I felt that I could use the sword a bit better. The attribute Lamarck Kirin has reached its saturation limit. Drop the saturation level to absorb new story fragments. I felt better after eating 2 story fragments and sat down on a pile of garbage. It is a bit cold. It was less painful than before, but the cold continued to prickle at my skin. The durability of my body had increased, but the exile penalty hadn't disappeared. I felt a big emptiness and loneliness from the loss of the story. I seemed to know why people wanted to hear, see, or read something over and over. Then a slight warmth started to flow through my body. Someone is talking about you. Talking about me? Your story is being created on planet Earth. I could see what happened. Someone was talking about me on Earth. Who was it? It couldn't be Yu Jong-hyuk, Lee Hyun-sung, Young Hee-won, or Shin Yu-sung? I didn't know. Still, it was funny. Someone was telling my story. Someone still remembered. The new story Kim Do-jaega's legend has been created on Peaceland. I hoped they would at least get my name right. I looked up at the night sky where the stars were invisible. This was the horizon of the story. I couldn't see the stars, and the stars couldn't see me. Thus, the arrogant stars wouldn't know. In a place they couldn't see, the story that was going to destroy them had just begun.